There is no worse mistake than
What's a good length of time for the first date to avoid it going too long? What would you say?
before the fourth mistake people make on a date is having no.
Five first date mistakes that guarantee that you won't get a second date. How many of these are you making right now? In this video, we're going to show you these mistakes that men are making, and they just don't even realize it. What is the first mistake men make that is assuring that they're not getting a second date?
Mistake number one, refusing to plan. There's no worse mistake you can make going, what type of food do you like? What restaurant do you go to? What's your favorite restaurant? Which of these movies do you want to see? The more you ask her questions, and this is what I used to do. I was thinking, oh, I'm showing that I respect her as a woman, I care about her opinion. And all she's hearing is, oh, this guy's indecisive. He can't even make a decision. This guy can't even choose a movie. And what you want to do is be someone who just says, here's a choice, here's what we're going to do. Even if she doesn't really normally like those things, you take her on a journey. So the more you plan the event, the stronger the date is going to be. So don't ask her opinion. You're saying, here's what I'm doing. You're invited on this journey. That's what being invited on a date is. And that's exciting because you're going on an adventure. Mistake number two, going to a movie. There is no worse mistake than going to a movie. And this applies to anywhere you haven't been before. So the only way you can take someone to a movie if you've already seen it and you know it will work for them. And that's not what you want to do. So I one time asked a friend, what movie should I show to a girl? And he recommended a movie called Short Bus, which I'd never seen before. And it is very, very naughty. It's very non romantic. It's got a lot of dirty stuff in it, a lot of weird stuff. And he was like laughing the next day. So don't take a friend's recommendation either. So you don't want to go to somewhere or something where you're not in control. The problem with a movie, and this happened to me in a college, I took a woman on a date to The Messenger, which is a story of Joan of Arc. And I was like, I'm taking her to a movie that's showing that I'm not afraid of strong, independent women. I forgot two things. Number one, it had more violence than Braveheart. And number two, Joan of Arc gets burned at the stake at the end. So it doesn't create a there's nothing like watching a young woman get burned alive to make a woman want to kiss you, right?
It's
It's
not
such a movie
romantic,
genre.
really. It's not romantic. I
And
took
it's
a Catholic girl to a movie that had, I didn't realize it. This is quite a while ago, called The Verdict with Paul Newman. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's kind of got an anti-Catholic tinge to it, or at least it was perceived that way. And she was very offended by it, actually.
exactly what you don't want to do is have something that's not your fault ruin the date. This is the same reason I would never go to a restaurant or a bar or nightclub I've ever been to before. And you don't know what's going to happen. So one time I was in New York, it was on my own. I went to see a DJ that I like. He's called the DJ's DJ, Danny Tenaglia, at this club called Vinyl. I don't know that it's a gay club. And there are just pictures of naked men on every wall. It's like an erotic art show.
Oh,
And it's very, it was very, very extreme, the pictures, okay? And it was like so over the top. If I brought a woman, I'm like, this DJ is amazing. You got to come with me, not knowing that, right? Because I didn't have one key piece of information, the decorations were very extreme, then it would have been a date killer. So lack of information. So whenever you're planning a date, the more factors you can control, the things that are outside your control that you can eliminate are the better. Which brings me to number three, which is never bring her on a dinner date. There's no bigger mistake than you can make. When you go to dinner, you're sitting across from each other at the table. This is an interrogation. This is like when you go to principal's office, right? You very rarely sit across the table from someone. If it reminds her of previous dates, every single date she's ever been on ended up in a breakup because she's with you. Anything you do that reminds her of previous dates, and this is how we were all taught. I was taught to take women to dinner for my first date too.
right.
Your parents will tell you to do this, and then when you ask your parents, was that how you met mom? It's never how they met mom.
Nope.
Parents will give us one advice about how to meet women, but it's not true. So the problem with a dinner date is that it's an environment you're not in control of. It's impossible to be romantic. You can't hold hands or touch to kind of get used to each other unless you sit on the same side of a booth. And that's a huge ask on a first date. Let's sit on the same side. It's very hard to create any level of intimacy unless you do that. Additionally, 99% of the time, the waiter will do something to tank your date. I've never had a good experience on a date with a waiter. If they see you going in for a kiss, they're going to come over and ask if you want dessert. I don't know if this happens to everyone, but my arch enemy is the waiter when I'm on a romantic date. They always do everything they can to ruin the date. In fact, once I made it my rule that I don't go on dinner dates, even with someone I'm dating, every time a girl forced me to do that before I was married, we broke up that night. It was that bad. If because I'll go in and say, hey, if you want, and I'll say, let's sit on the same side of the booth. If they say no, I already know it's going to be a horrible experience
Yeah, exactly.
because it's uncomfortable. It creates an interrogative vibe, and it creates all these memories. And the problem is that we're
Sitting
lied to
sitting
by
apart, opposite each other, sitting opposite each
yes,
other. Yeah,
face to
yeah,
face
right.
is very competitive. It's very antagonistic. You can't
It's
create
also what
rapport
friends
because
do. It's what friends do. You don't sit next to your friend. You sit across from your friend. And I think what I don't like about dinner dates, the worst thing is it puts men at a competitive disadvantage because most men aren't really great at conversation, and a dinner date forces you to be in conversation for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, which may be your weak point.
in addition, the lighting is always bad. It's either too bright or too dark. So you have, and there's a lot of factors outside your control. How about this? You take her on a date, she chokes on something, you're done. You're over because you're attached to a bad memory. She eats something she's allergic to. The cook messes up something. There's a lot
She
of
just doesn't like
factors
it. She just doesn't like the
that are,
food. It just, yeah.
the more factors you have in there. And here's another thing. This is what you're usually taught. Oh, spend a little more than you normally would on the first date. Guess what? If you spend $100 on the dinner on the first date, she's expecting that on the second. And you're creating a trend you can't maintain. Or if you go to a low place, then like not expensive, then some women will be like, oh my gosh, this guy's so poor. And it's like, well, I don't want to spend a lot of money on someone I don't know. What if I hate you? I don't want to take the most expensive restaurant in town until I get to know you. I want each restaurant to be better. But a lot of women don't see it that way. And that's what all of these things mean that you're in an environment that's outside of your control that reminds her of a lot of bad dates. And we've been lied to by movies. I always talk about how much I hate when Harry Met Sally. They show all these dinner dates. In a movie, when they show a dinner scene, it's like 3 or 5 minutes. They don't show an entire. If you watched a movie of a dinner that was 4 hours, it would be so boring. That's why they never show that. They just show you the highlights. Avoid a situation, and what you said is also very important. When there's nothing else happening, there's so much pressure on the conversation. How about this? You go on a dinner date, the food takes an hour to be ready. Now she hates you. Now, because there's two strategies women employ two strategies before a dinner date. Number one is they eat before they come out with you so they can eat something small because women don't want to eat a big meal in front of you and look like a pig. Women are very conscious of that. It's very hard to be attractive while you're eating. It's not a
Hmm.
it's kind of like as a man you can't look tough drinking from a straw. It's impossible. You have two options, tough or straw. It's just you can't do it. It just doesn't look tough, unfortunately, even though it's better for your teeth. And the other thing is that they go, "Oh, we're just going to take a nice restaurant. I'm not going to eat. I'm going to eat a light lunch because I know I don't want to not finish whatever we eat at the restaurant and look unappreciative." So then she's
Now she's
there, she
hungry,
hasn't
super hungry.
super hungry, and then the food takes too long.
Yeah.
Anything, and that's not your fault. All of these things, same with the movie. Anytime you go to a place where you have very little control, the more factors outside of your control, the more likely a date is to fail.
Another thing that can happen is that you lose your mastery in something because you're being told what to do by the manager, the hostess. You have to wait. It makes you look kind of beta because you're being told what to do and you're having to wait and you're being treated like a peon, which just doesn't create a good first impression.
The danger with that is, let's say something happens and you have two choices. You can either eat it or start a confrontation. And both, some type of women like one, some like the other, right? Like if you, my children, for the first time, saw me yell at someone where there's a huge line this lady was trying to cut. I was like, there's 500 people in this line. And I went off. If just because I was like, oh, the kids have never seen this. Let's see if they like it. They hated it. They were like, wow, dad, we've never seen you yell at anyone. And it was like 120 degrees. We're in a huge line. And I was like, I have kids too. I have 4 kids with me, one of whom is a baby too. You don't need to cut the whole line, right? But it created a huge, very uncomfortable event. So you're caught in a situation where you either take it and look like a beta or you start a fight and look like a monster. So very rarely, like, do I want to get into a public conversation, confrontation. Probably my first time in 10 years. I was just with the kids, so stressed, so hot. But no one looked at me and go, wow, what a great dad. Nobody looked at me in that situation and goes, wow, what a great dad. What a hero for defending his kid's spot in this 1,000 degree line. So that's very negative. So the next mistake that people make on a first date is number four. The fourth mistake people make on a date is having no strategy, which means how do you want the date to end? Like you go out to somewhere an hour away from where you live, you're not going to end up back at your house. There's nothing intentional. So when I'm designing a date, I want to think about multiple locations that are short, multiple short dates. Why do I do that? Well, let's say it's a bad date, I can get out after the first location. If it's a good date, multiple locations makes you more memorable, gives you more opportunities for something good to happen. So going to one location where the odds are against you is the opposite of what you want to do. So having a plan is so critical going, and you have to say to yourself, why am I going to each of these places? Why is this somewhere that someone else would want to go? Most often, going back to the last point, people go, oh, well, I heard this is a good restaurant. That's not very good. And most people, right? There's only a small percentage of people that are driven by taste. Like, oh, that's all I care about, right? And much better to think of a better reason than that. So this is somewhere that's interesting or the people will like you. People want that more.
Are you talking about a reason to tell her or a reason for you to be taking her there? Which is a
Both. So if you, for example, we're having a conversation, you say, oh, I took a woman to this bar. I would go, why? Why did you go to that bar? And if you have no answer, you have a problem. That means you didn't do a strategy. And it could be as simple as it's the closest bar to my house. That's an okay answer. So that's at least being intentional with your planning. The mistake is to have no intention and to kind of do random things. And that can happen where you have no planning, you end up on a date that creates problems because there's no strategy to it. For example, let's say you're going to go to three bars. If you don't think about the geography, right, you can end up in the wrong part. Like you start close to you, move further and further away, then you have problems getting home. When I was living in London, I always kept in mind where the train stations were and when they runs to make sure that I could make the ride home. And at a certain time, the train stop, you have to switch to buses. So that was always part of my planning and thinking about where I live, where she lives, because that's an important part of where the trains change, where's a train station, and all of that stuff comes part of my strategy. So you want to be very intentional. If you can say, I'm going to this location for this reason, that's important. And remember, it has to be a place you've been before. We talk about, and this is number five, which is don't go somewhere you've never been before. We've already mentioned restaurants, we've already mentioned um, movies that you haven't seen before, but even if you go, this is a huge mistake. Oh, I told you about that bar I went to, I had no idea. If you say, oh, I heard this bar is cool, if you haven't been there, there could be something shocking. You just don't know. There can be some really big surprises. Like I've been to places that are unsafe, right? I think it's like 40% of women won't go into a bar if there's three motorcycles pointed out front, and 90% of women won't go in if there's eight. Hey, guess what? If there's eight, I'm also not going in. That's a like, you know what I mean? Because there's a negative connotation. You go, oh, this is a biker bar. So you
well. Also,
have to
here's
know.
another thing. Maybe you don't like bars. I don't like bars. I don't like crowded bars. So I wouldn't take a girl on different bars because I don't like them. I would do something else.
Whatever the location is, you have to have been there before because you don't know what you don't know. I've been to bars where there's no bathroom. Okay, that's not a conversation you want to have. Oh, it's our first date. You need to hold it. That you don't want to say like that's a silly thing to say. There's places where there's an element of safety that you aren't aware of. All of these things. If you haven't been there before, you don't know what the parking lot is like. What's the neighborhood is like. That's very important. These small mistakes can be very detrimental, and that's important. It's all part of it. So always, whenever you're going to go, whether it's a cafe, my first date when I had no money, when I first started out doing this, my first date was we'd walk up a road to an art gallery where they were selling paintings that were all, let's be honest, bad. And so I'd be like, who wants this ugly horse painting? Like that's my approach to most art. Most art is bad, and that's the start of it. Then I would go to a park where there was a statue from Alice in Through the Looking Glass because it was where Lewis Carroll had lived in this town for a short time. He didn't write Alice in Wonderland there, but they had the statue to it. And the problem with the statue is that it's her going through the looking glass, and it looks like when Han Solo's going into carbonite. It doesn't look happy. She's like, but no one, most they haven't seen it, so it's a surprise, and it's a cool location. And I did a lot of research. I found a small blog post. It was really hard to find. Actually, if I went on a date with a woman and tried to find it, it would have been a disaster. The first time I found it, it took me 2 hours. It's really small park, but for some reason it was so hard to find. But once you find it, it's amazing. It's really interesting. It's a big garden, but it's always empty. Very cool. And there's another statue on a main road near my house. I'm always working towards the house in this direction, and it was like a rabbit hopping and a little girl looking at it. You don't realize because it's so small. You're not thinking. You go, that's Alice before she goes in the hole. So now, the reason this is a good date, it's an adventure. I'm going to show you something no one's ever seen before in this town.
Right.
That's another way to do it. So it's a non-drinking date. It's a non-bar date. It's a lot of walking. We walk up a hill and down a hill.
Right.
It's like if you're just walking and it's like 1 hour, so it's a 2 hour date. Very simple, but that's another way to do it. But again, you have to go there first to know what it looks like, to know all because there's all these things that you don't think of. What if there's a hole in the ground? My wife and I were at a bar recently or a club, very go out, and she fell through a hole in the floor. Like
Oh my
she hurt her
gosh.
leg with the whole
That
thing.
was
And it's
terrible.
like that that will kill a first date. Like anything like that. So
Yeah.
the key thing is that you go somewhere intentional and you've been there before so you know it's fun. There's a lot of places that I've thought have been fun. I don't know if this ever happened to you, but I've been to an off-brand theme park before. I went to an off-brand theme park in Japan. It seemed like a great idea. I got trapped in a um, roller coaster. And when I say I got trapped, I mean I'm the only person because the guy locked in the seat one notch too hard. So to unlock it, they have to push it in and then it unlatches. We pushed it in so deep, there was no more give. And then everyone leaves. I'm waiting an hour. I think the guy's going to come with a welding torch. That's what I'm waiting for. I'm like, they're going to have to cut me out of this thing. Fortunately, I had a special key that unlocked it. And it was like, not my fault. I'd already locked it tight. The person pushed in one notch tighter. And that's a nightmare. Why? I hadn't been there before. So anything you go to, I would never think of that. I didn't get on the roller coaster thinking, oh, what if I get trapped? Now I do. Okay. But that's the reason you have to go there first because you want to get a feel. Also, I used to go to a honky tonk when I lived in Nashville. Great place to go, great music. If you bring a girl within 20 feet of the band, you'll never see her again. So I know there's a certain part that's so dangerous because they have so much control. I never take a date to a live music. Never. Because you're never the most interesting person in the room. The band is controlling. This place was large enough. There was areas where the band wasn't controlling. I see all these guys. They bring their girls to show them, hey, I know a cool band, and you just watch the girl drift away from the guy. You just watch him lose his first date, like into the pool, because these guys were great musicians. Some of them were road musicians for really, really big musicians. Like A-list, they're like, oh, we're here, but then sometimes I travel and I'm Kid Rock's guitarist. That was one of the guys, and I was like, oh my
Ooh.
gosh, that's not what you want. Like that's what I mean. So
It really, you're not going to match that, really.
So you wouldn't know that until you go there. And I only figured that by watching it happen to other guys. I was like, wow, if I'm talking to a girl, even if I meet a girl there, I know that like there's a red line. Once I cross it, it's so dangerous because there's someone else with more power. So always keep in mind you want to go there first. You want to see how people are interacting. Want to see what the culture is like. Because there's some places that are like there's some bars where people get into fights a lot and there's some bars they don't. I don't go to the first kind. Like I'm not interested in a bar fight and I'm that kind of stuff. Like sometimes there's a bad energy. So all of those things you want to know. There was a really cool bar I wanted to go to one time and then I realized they shared a parking lot with a huge adult bookstore. And I was
Ugh.
like, well, that's again, what do you do? How did
That's
you find this
terrible.
place? And she goes, oh, how did you find this bar? Oh, well, one time I was at the bookstore.
Yeah.
Like that's what she's going to think. So, and you wouldn't know that,
Right.
right? Unless you're really digging into Google Maps. So go there first, get a feel for the location, get comfortable. And we'll talk about this in other videos, how to get comfortable. But you don't want to go somewhere where you don't feel comfortable. Like I've been to a lot of live jazz bars, and 99% of the time, it's very comfortable. It's a really good vibe. The music's amazing. Everything's good.
Hmm.
And then sometimes you go and it's like the music is disjointed or there's a bad energy. Like it's not a good feel. It just happens sometimes any type of music. Same thing for different bars I've been to. Sometimes there's not a good feel or sometimes they don't, I used to go like they don't know how to make a drink. All the drinks taste bad. Like where I live, we live in a place where people go on vacation, the drinks are so sugary. Every time I order a mixed drink, I have to spit it out. I'm like, what did you do? Just make the drink and then add sugar to it?
Well, I tell you what, besides that, also, they're
Yep.
very loud. Sometimes they're way too loud. And generally, the worse the music, the louder they play. And I hate incredibly loud music. You can't hear anything. So why would you have fun there? Who's going to really enjoy that?
You brought up a great point. If it's too loud, you're going to have a lot of problems. There's a trick to make someone able to hear you. If you actually push the earlobe in, people can hear you perfectly. However, most people interpret that as an assault when you push on their ear because you don't think it's going to work. The first
You
time
could tell her to push on her ear. You could show her.
a friend did it to me at a rave. It was so loud. He pushed it. I could hear it perfectly. I was like, I can't believe that works, but it was so uncomfortable. So if it's too loud, they're not going to hear you. There's no way to make it hearable and comfortable. So absolutely, you want to make sure that you don't want total silence. And you don't want too loud. You want that thing in between because what's going to happen, and this has happened to me, where it's really loud, you say something and the wrong word happens right as there's a moment of silence and it echoes. That once happened to me at an arena where 40,000 people heard me say the wrong word to a band. They were the opening act and they weren't good. I wanted to get to the main act. And the band all looked at me. I was eighth row. They all heard it. And I was like, in a way, I wanted them to hear it, but also it's like that's pretty rough. Like,
Yeah.
so that's the thing to watch out. So you're exactly right. And that's why you want to go there first is to see where is the bathroom? Where is what's the location like? What's the stairs like? What's the parking like? All of those things you wouldn't think of. It's just by going there first gives you a lot more control so you can control the variables. Sometimes you ever been to one of those restaurants where it's someone's birthday and suddenly there's a huge singing thing and like if a place might have that you don't know about. So all of those things are
Two or
into
three
like how you want to.
birthdays. You know, it's just like, oh, here it is
Oh, this
again.
is where
Here it
everyone.
is again.
I didn't know this is where everyone goes on their birthday. Right? Now you got a
Yeah.
situation. So all of that means be intentional with your date. Go to a location that's fun, but you're there for a reason, and you go there first to make sure that the advice you got from your friend or what you read online, because I've read a lot of reviews that say they're recent and the place is closed. That's a
Yeah.
horrible result. That's actually the
Right.
worst thing that can happen. You go there and it's been closed for a while because now you've created a really bad result. And that's happened to me. Not on a date, but I looked up something and only realized it was closed when I got there. It's so horrible, or it's the day it's closed. So that's why you want to go there first. All of that research makes a big difference. And really, this is how you avoid having a terrible first date.
I would say the fifth uh, bad date mistake is just spending too much money, period. I mean, you shouldn't have to spend much money on a first date. It just sets the whole bad tone for everything.
You brought up a very important topic. So you'll see if you watch videos about first dates, every woman is like, you have to spend as much money as you can. You should spend a month's income on your first date. What you're doing on the first date is setting the tone.
Yeah.
So if you take a woman to a jazz bar, now also there's two types of jazz. I really like one type of jazz and not the other kind. One type is like you don't know what's going to happen. Like it's a lot of improv and a lot of surprise. I don't really like that. I want a little bit of a plan so that's like going to stay smooth. Like it's a little less going on, but I really like it. However, if you take a woman to a jazz bar and you don't like jazz, you done created yourself a problem. This is the same thing happens to women. You bring a woman to a football game for a date and she pretends she likes it because she likes you. And then you buy season tickets and she has to go and she's stuck each time she goes. It's harder for her to say, I don't like this. It's the same thing. So women will go to
I
something
thought
they
you
don't
liked
like
it.
and
I
they like it.
never liked it. You'll never have that
Yeah.
discussion. She'll just leave. I mean, it's just
And
very
it's you
hard.
get trapped and it's like
Yeah.
for example, I really like the tailgating part. I'm from Tennessee. I like that part of it. Once I get in there, sometimes some sports I like and some I don't, but that's the thing is that like you like different parts. A lot of people like, oh, I like the part before the game. I have a lot of friends that they tailgate, they never have tickets. So it's important to take someone that sets the right tone. We have this idea that we need to impress a person. Money is the worst way to impress someone because you create a pressure on yourself to always have to spend money. And I also know, look, I've worked with guys who are millionaires, high millionaires, hundreds of millions of dollars, and they get stuck doing things that are not fun. Not everything expensive is fun, right? So, like wine tastings, not fun for me. I've been to
I
one.
don't
I was
like
like,
them.
gotta spit it
I don't
out.
like them.
Oh, like anything, you know what I mean?
No.
Also, I don't like museums. It's very hard for me to do that, right? You don't want
Well,
to do
I
things you
love
don't like.
museums, but I think a lot of people don't, and she's not necessarily going to tell you she doesn't like the museum because it may make her feel like she's uncultured or ignorant or uneducated, but she doesn't like it, and that's very common. And I wouldn't want to. So
That's
what's a good what's a good length of time for the first date to avoid it going too long? What would you say?
I like to have three locations that can each last 30 to 60 minutes. So that means I can
Okay.
have an hour and a half date to a 3 hour date where we're having a good time. And that allows me, I usually have four locations, I have an alternate. And I really like that. And I like that the date to have like a theme. Everyone's different. So I used to have friends who there's a bunch of haunted things in London. So you can actually go, oh, we're going to go to three haunted bars. That's interesting. See how it's interesting? You don't even like bars, but I now you go, oh, that's haunted. At least there's something. At least there's something that you're like, well, what does that mean? And some of the haunted bars have like all the drinks are themed, which can either be interesting or annoying, depends on your personality. So I have friends who have done that, and it was very well for them because it fit their personality. So if you can have a theme, whatever it is, right? You go, oh, we're going to go and see three different types of things that are interesting. When you're describing your date, you want to be able to say, you're going to like this because. So the more the date is interesting, the less my conversation has to be interesting. This goes back to when you said on a dinner date, it's all on you, it's all on your conversational skills. So I want to rely on my conversational skills as little as possible. I'm great at it, but I still always want the odds to be max in my favor. So the more the place is interesting and I can describe it,
Okay.
and when I describe it, it sounds interesting. So I'll give you an example. So
Okay.
when I would take my when I would go to three bars, I'd say, "Oh, we're going to go to this one. It's all international people. You're going to see people from every different country. They all come here. You're going to hear people speaking in Portuguese. You're going to hear people speaking in Brazilian Portuguese. You're going to hear people speaking in Chinese. It's so cool to see everyone in the same place, all kind of just connecting, right? It's really cool. And they have a band there, but it was really not loud, which is really nice. You wouldn't even know it was a live band because it's about the like volume normally people play CDs.
Sure.
That's one. Next to it, my alternate, this was my alternate, was a place where people would do salsa dancing, which I am not good at. So, but I would go there sometimes as long as it's not busy. You don't get this is something I learned the hard way. Don't go to a salsa place where everyone's really good at dancing because then a girl will dance with a better dancing guy. Creates a whole
And they're
situation.
very loud
But
anyway. Too loud for me.
right. So you go there and you go, oh, sometime, and also that place normally have an outdoor area. I'd go to the outdoor area there. So I was
Okay.
very intentional. And I go, oh, this place you can hear really good salsa music, really good live band, but you're outside so you can see the sun. I like to be outside on dates. I love to be outside. That's why I like rooftop bars. Another great thing because you go, oh my gosh, you can see the most amazing view.
Yeah.
That's a very good one. So you see how you're saying something that makes it more interesting than it's just a bar. It's oh this. Then the next place I would go, unfortunately, it's closed. Last time I went to London, it was gone. I was so disappointed. This bar was small, and they would always play minimalist techno, which I'd never heard of before I started going there, which means it's not very loud. There's not a lot of instrumentation. It's just like in the background, but like slow, so it's not too distracting.
Right. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you would hate it because it's very modern music. It's like
Yeah.
techno with like half the instruments, and then they would just play old Mighty Mouse cartoons on a projector, which I could. That's a bunch of things and that are interesting about it, right? So
Yeah.
it was little and it
Yeah.
was smaller, quieter.
It is.
You can only
It
fit
is.
20 to 50 people, and it creates an intimacy. So I'm going from louder places to smaller places, and that's see how there's a little bit of a journey, and each place I can tell you a reason. And also, I found it. So if I was going to ask you on a date, I found it right away. You don't like minimalist techno. We're not going there because I can describe the place quickly. I can see what type of things you like and don't like, which means I can go to one of my alternates. And that's part of it is going, here's why we're going to A, here's where we're going to B, here's where we're going to C.
So
And
you
having
really
each,
have to have a point to each thing. So if you
yes,
want to go on a very close to free date and you want to have a really good time, you might be in a particular street that has kind of interesting things. Like in LA, there's Abbot Kinney. In Washington D.C., there's Adams Morgan. There's different. Every town has sort of an active kind of fun place, and they have coffee places and they have stuff that don't cost money, and they'll have some art, street art. So you could do is you can bring her to three different things there. You don't even have to spend any money. Maybe just have coffee, but you kind of are enthusiastic, and you might talk about it, or might, and that could be a fantastic first date that doesn't cost very much because, as you've said, you have intentionality, and there's something about each thing that you do that's interesting, right? That's the point you're making.
yeah. So my free date was free. That's why I would go to an art gallery that was free. And then the paid date was probably $20 to $30. So that's my most expensive date because you'd buy two drinks at each place. If you're buying for all three, sometimes I buy around, she buys around, depends on the girl. Even if I buy six drinks, it's not very expensive, and you've now been to three places, and it's so much more successful than a date where I've been on a date where I spent $500 on a dinner. Big mistake. No second date. Learn my lesson the hard
Yeah.
way. So
And so I'll leave you with one more thing that you're taking advantage of, and you probably know this, but when you have three different settings for something with a person, then even if it's in 20 or 30 minutes, they feel like they've known you a lot longer than they really have. If you take her to three different things over an hour and a half, by the third one, she feels like she's known you a long time, even though she just met you. So you have this comfort and safety and security, and it really compresses the time that's required to get to know somebody enough for a physical relationship, actually.
you're exactly right. And we talk about this in some of our other videos about how to be more memorable or be more interesting. This is one of the ways to do that. And a great example is think about someone you were a coworker with that you only saw at work for 2 years. You probably, from those 2 years, can remember 5 or 10 minutes of them because there was one background. But the coworkers that you went out to dinner with at different places, you probably remember them a lot stronger. That's a great example of that. So you want to see someone in different environments, and also it allows you to, again, create rapport, create a stronger relationship, and it increases the odds of them of a next date, because at the end of one date, she'll feel like she's been on 3 dates with you.
Right.
It's a lot easier to go from 3 dates to a fourth date from a first date to a second.
Yep, that's right. So those are the 5 mistakes, and we've shown you how to plan a really, really good date. So what I want you to do now is we have 700,000 men that we work with off of YouTube. What I want you to do is to help us out here. If you like this content, like it and subscribe, which is very helpful for the algorithm as this is really growing quickly. And leave a comment. We'll try to get to all the comments that we can, and we'll see you on the next video.